Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Gore, Chair of ANC 34G, and thank you for coming out tonight. We have about 47 participants online, and it looks like about that many here in person. So thank you, everyone, for coming out and braving the weather and the traffic and everything else. Welcome to tonight's ANC 34G regular meeting. We have a very full agenda. I want to start out by introducing the commissioners and call to order about 7:10. We were working on getting our outer connection established. We weren't able to do that, so we're just going to proceed with the meeting. Commissioners, if we can go from my left to the right, straight down the room and introduce yourself.
My name is Peter Lynch. I'm the commissioner for SMD 05. Thank you for being at the meeting.
I'm Jim Nash. I represent Single Member District 03. Good evening. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, I'm Peter Goslin. I represent District 6, which is largely the west side of Connecticut to Friendship Heights, and welcome.
And good evening. My name is Lisa Gore. I represent 3G01, which serves all of Hawthorne and portions of Barnaby Woods.
I'm Bruce Sherman. I represent Single Member District 02, which is all the way over by Rock Creek Park, kind of north of Military up to Tennyson, borders on Oregon, over to Utah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Ferguson. I represent Single Member District 07, south of Military. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. I want to start by just an overview of meeting procedures. So people in the audience, if you want to speak, please just come up to the mic when it's your, audience time to speak, and we'll let you know when that is. If you don't speak at the mic, it's really hard for folks online to hear you. So sometimes we know you like to, say something from your seat, but we really do need you to come to the mic. For folks that are online, if you could use the raise your hand feature, which is in the reaction section, roughly in the middle of your screen. You click on that reaction, there's a raise your hand feature, and we will promote you so that you can speak. I ask everyone to just be kind to everyone and respectful of everyone's views and opinions. And we will get through this meeting right on time, 8:30, because we do have to let staff here enough time to get finished what they have to do. They have to be out right at 9 o'clock. And it does take us a while to set everything back into place and make sure that we're out of here on time for them to do that. With that said, commissioners, do you have any changes to the agenda?
I have two. Peyton Manning, that's his name, with DC Plug is not going to present tonight. This is he wants to do an overview. They're going to bury some more electrical cables in our neighborhood, but he will be on next our February 26th agenda. And as best as I can determine, Tim Walsh with the Avenue is not going to be available to talk about what was the American City Diner. I spoke with him as recently as this afternoon, and he was still not sure he would be ready to present, and I haven't heard from him since. So with those are two changes I want to make.
Okay. Any more commissioners? Any other changes? Okay. I move that we adopt the agenda as changed. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. 6-0. That motion carries. With the consent agenda, the only thing that we have on there are the minutes from January 8th. Bruce, did we circulate those? Yeah. Are those ready to be approved? Yeah. Oh, Jim.
Yeah, I'm taking that on, and I'm about halfway through them. I hope to have them at our next meeting. Sorry about that.
No problem. Got it. Okay. And we will move straight to the resident forum, which is a 15-minute segment that we allow community members to raise topics to the ANC that are not on the agenda. If anyone has anything online or in person that they want to discuss that's not an agenda item that you do want to bring to the ANC's attention, this is a portion of the meeting that you can do that. So I would ask community members that are here in present or in person, you could step to the mic. If anyone online has an issue, use your reaction feature. Hey, Ron, go on.
Thank you. Do you hear me all right? Okay, thank you. I'm Ron Kahn. I live on Livingston near Connecticut Avenue. And I was here really because I thought Peyton Manning was going to speak to us. I guess not, but that's life. The real Peyton Manning, right? But I have a question for the ANC to consider. I don't know if you have. When you're doing testimony, for example, during the hearings that are going on right now over the next month, is the testimony of the ANC something that gets into the materials, the documents in the ANC site? I'm just trying to double check that. Is that the normal process? I don't mean to waste your time, but I just want to make sure that's captured there so we can see it, because a lot of times it just happens, right? And I don't know how much you do, but I wanted to throw that out there maybe if you could confirm that.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I repeat your question. It's a little hard to hear with the mask. But you're basically asking, when we prepare testimony, where do we put that on the ANC website? It would be under the document section. So there's two portions to the site. Older documents are, there is still a link for testimony that is for older documents. I would say probably 2022 and back. The newer testimonies are posted under the document link. And they're loaded onto that, looks like a running spreadsheet of all documents, whether it's testimony, letters that we write, but that's where it's loaded to.
And that's what you do now. That's your practice now anyhow. I just want to confirm that's what you're doing now, as opposed to maybe you need to or could look into do that a little more explicitly in terms of a practice.
Yeah.
That's all.
And we would never, if we do testimony, it's always going to come to the community first. So it's going to be on the agenda. We're going to talk about it and vote on it. So that way you'll know in advance. And then when it's signed, it goes up onto that section of the website.
Okay, it's just a question when you're going to the council or going, in the testimony at committees and departments and agencies, that's on the site as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
I just raised a question about the issue of testimony is here. Do we have a schedule yet? I noticed that I think we missed Department of Transportation last Friday. And I'm concerned that we get to all the oversight hearings that we need to. So. Anyways.
Well, the council, of course, has a schedule, so we can consult that, but I don't know if we've had a schedule internal to the ANC as to who might be testifying. That's a separate question.
I think we need to decide which ones we're going to testify at soon.
I think it was January 22nd. There was a regular ANC meeting and the RFP was brought up briefly. And at the time, the ANC said that there would be a special meeting devoted to it. So I wondered if that's still going to happen.
So I will hold that off until the section of the agenda where we have an update on the RFP, which is roughly 8:05. Anything else from the community? Okay. So I know a lot of folks are here for the historic district conversation, but we want to go on and get started. Zach, I'll pass it over to you for discussion and possible vote on a BZA special exemption for 5207 38th Street Northwest.
Yes, I'm going to welcome our neighbors and residents, Chaz Cadwell and his wife, Mary Shapiro, and they've got their attorney with us. And they're going to give a short presentation, but they have a BZA application and the materials have been posted online with the agenda. And so if one of you could pull up their PowerPoint, not a co-host, but they can walk us through the slides. Or if you make me co-host.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, while that's happening, I'm Charles Cadwell. My wife, Mary Shapiro, and I have lived at 5207 38th Street for, I think, 37 years. And we like our house. We want to stay in our house, but we're 37 years older than we were when we bought it. And so we want to put in an elevator. The elevator would be in the back corner of the house near the alley. It's a two-story elevator with access at the ground level. And our two neighbors on each adjacent side have given us very nice letters supporting the application. But to explain it to you, I've got my attorney, Eric DeBeer, my architect, Jane Tracy, with me tonight to go through a few slides to show you the project we have in mind.
Thank you, Chaz. So I don't know if the commissioners would like us to hold off while we get this resolved. We could also talk through it without the images and see if anyone has questions.
Give us 1 minute.
Okay.
While you were waiting, I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
So I worked for a presidential board whose chairman at the time was Walter Isaacson. And Walter hated PowerPoints with a passion. And the deputy Secretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs was set to give a big presentation on public diplomacy strategy worldwide. And in the middle of the presentation, the system crashed. And Walter turned to her and simply said, "Well, I'm sure you didn't need that presentation anyway." And she was completely mortified. Without the PowerPoint presentation, everything ground to a halt. But there is a PowerPoint, anti-PowerPoint tyranny in the world as we know it. We won't impose that on you here. Hold on.
Maybe
We'll see what
slightly lower
happens.
stakes.
Or you may need to talk through it.
Here we go. All right. Thank you to the commissioners. As Mr. Cadwell said, my name's Eric DeBeer. I'm from Cozen O'Connor, land use attorney for the homeowners. We do have a short presentation. We also have the architect here, Jane Tracy, to answer any questions about the plans. If you could go to the next slide, please. To give a brief background, the property is located in the R1B zone, which is your standard single family zone in the area. Next slide, please. As Mr. Cadwell mentioned, the crux of the addition is a new two-story elevator on the rear side of his house by the alley. They would also be covering an existing porch. The entire new project would be a little over 11 feet by 19 feet and would actually be over the existing porch that's there, which is uncovered. We have asked the BZA for relief from the requirements for rear yard, which I will get to at the very end of the presentation, but we can move through quickly. And as Mr. Cadwell said, both adjoining neighbors have submitted letters of support, and those are in the BZA case record. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, you can see the scope of the project, which is, again, the back corner by the alley that kind of goes around the bend there. You can see on the right side, the existing deck. Next slide, please. And now I'm just going to turn it over quickly to Ms. Tracy just to walk through the plans.
Thank you, Eric. Jane Tracy, Tracy Niegelberger Architects. On the site plan, there is, the front of the house is at the bottom of the image. That's 38th Street. There's your front door. The rear corner, which is the northeast corner, there's a darker square that happens to be the elevator itself. And the lighter area is the one-story porch. So it's a one-story porch and a two-story elevator. You can go to the next slide. That on the left is the existing plan, and you can see there is a terrace or a porch, uncovered porch in the area where we're talking about putting the elevator and a full covered porch. And you can see then that on the proposed on the right side. It is a simple elevator. You can enter at grade back there and then come up a half a story to get into the house, 3.5 feet. And then one more story up, and that would be the next slide. Takes you then to the second floor. And you can see there was nothing really there in the existing. It's just the elevator coming up for the proposed. And then the next slide shows a three-dimensional view of it. On the left, existing, where there's nothing going on there except for a deck or a terrace. The elevator is that tall, skinny piece, and then the porch, which extends from an existing one-story sunroom. That pretty much explains the scope of it. It's a pretty small project. But happy to take any questions.
One more slide.
Oh, there's one more?
Yeah.
Which one's that? Okay, one more. This is
Thank
you.
Yes.
This is wider.
Yes, and then just to wrap this up again, we've come to the BZA to request special exception relief. You can see I've circled at the top there. There is an existing nonconformity in terms of the rear yard. 25 feet is required, but the rear yard is set back from that property line. I believe it's the western property line by 4.2 feet. Since we are creating an addition and going up, we would be extending that nonconformity. So the rear yard will remain 4.2 feet, but because the zoning regulations do not allow you to extend a nonconformity, we've had to ask for special exception relief. The hearing is scheduled for March 20th. As I mentioned, both adjoining neighbors have filed letters of support, which is wonderful. And we're here asking for the ANC's support as well, and certainly open to any questions that you all may have. Thank you.
And I'll leave it open for any comments or questions, but pending no comments or questions, I move to support this application to vote. Do I have a second? Gosselin. Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. Please count 7. All opposed? 0. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just have a simple question. Who makes elevators for residential use? Yeah, pretty cool.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for doing that, and commissioners for the vote. At this point, we'll have presentations on the Chevy Chase Historic District. There's 2 groups, I believe, presenting tonight. I'm gonna turn this part of the agenda over to Commissioners Gosselin and Lynch.
Commissioner Lynch and I have had conversations with people on both sides. I think we'll start with the mover, which is Chevy Chase Conservancy, Mary Rowse and Stephanie, is it pronounced Jacobe, are online and will present online. And then leaving Chevy Chase, Greg Schmidt and others, yes, and others will present. I suggest that both sides take something like 20 minutes, a half an hour, and then we'll have questions from the audience online and here. So with that, Mary or Stephanie, would you like to kick it off?
And Commissioner Gosselin, just before we get started, just a little note on our procedure here. We do have our new whiz-bang AI-enabled transcription service running, and it works only when people speak directly into the microphone, and it can sort of capture the voice. So commissioners, when you're speaking, and those at the microphone here, speak as clearly, enunciate as clearly as you can. And then those online, be sure that you're close enough to your computer so that the system can capture it. It greatly helps us produce transcripts. Thanks.
And let me add one thing. This is just the first of what I suspect will be several meetings, whether consecutively or otherwise, on this subject. It is a important subject, certainly in my S&D and Commissioner Lynch's. So we haven't, for example, invited HPO, the Historic Preservation Office, to speak tonight, but that doesn't mean we're not going to. We will. But we figured as a curtain raiser, having the two sides present their views and our asking questions would probably be the best way to start. So, Commissioner Lynch, do you have other things you'd like to add? Okay. Mary Rowse.
Hi, can you all hear me? Great. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Rowse. I am with the Chevy Chase DC Conservancy, and tonight we're going to give you some information about the proposed historic district. I will speak briefly, and then I'll ask Stephanie Jacobe, Dr. Stephanie Jacobe, to talk. She's an architectural historian. She will talk about the actual nomination and explain some of the issues that we covered in that. And then a resident of the historic district, Bill Gordon, will also be speaking. So there'll be the three of us talking. And there is a couple of handouts that were brought to the meeting. And I hope that you'll get a chance to pick up one of those or both of those. I know Bill will be talking about one of them. So the Chevy Chase Conservancy filed the nomination on October 16th with the city. And the city took about a month to review it and to see if it met all the criteria, and then announced on the 17th of November, I believe, that it was accepting the nomination, and then turned around in a couple of days and mailed letters to all property owners within the boundary. So all property owners should have received letters from the city. And of course, the Conservancy will also be reaching out or continuing our outreach to the community and to the people in the proposed area. One of the things I just wanted to comment on was we just went through a brief session here with some applicants for a BZA variance. And I think most of us would probably agree that it's pretty comforting to be able to be part of a process like that, where if somebody's making a change to their home, people get a chance to listen to to be presented with the plans and offered a chance to comment on them and to be heard before the ANC, their neighbors, before a city agency. And that's something that I think most people probably appreciate. I think that's what a historic district does as well. Historic districts give people the chance to be at the table and have a voice for any changes that happen in their community regarding new construction, new buildings, the possibility of demolishing a building. And it gives people a chance to weigh in on their built environment and to feel that they can have a say about things. I think a lot of some of the opponents have talked about how upsetting they feel it would be to not have a say about things. But in fact, that's what a historic district does. It gives people a chance to weigh in on things and to feel that they are part of a decision-making process. And it's an environmental movement, really. It's an environmental approach to our built environment so that we try to reuse and repurpose and, you know, have adaptive reuse and just try to protect the existing historic street features, but never stop new changes to those features. Additions and changes can be made. All kinds of modifications can be done. And buildings that are not contributing can even be demolished in a historic district. Just a few quick things. Historic districts do not stop affordable housing. Affordable housing decisions are made by zoning bodies, not by preservation bodies. And historic districts do not freeze a neighborhood in time. They do not decrease property values. They, I think, help prevent neighbor to neighbor disputes. I think that the city offers a kind of a buffering opportunity for neighbors to hear about new projects, as we did just tonight. So that if a neighbor is planning to do something, it isn't just a neighbor versus neighbor situation, but the city actually can learn about the plans and work with the neighbor if there's anything that may need modification to help make it more sensitive to the built environment already here. I know that many of you may have already looked at the nomination, but Stephanie Jacobe is going to talk about some of the specifics and details in the nomination. So Stephanie, why don't you do your presentation, and then I'll come in after that.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. Can everyone hear me? I hope so. I need to share my screen. I'm going to try to do that. Okay. I need someone to undisable my screen sharing.
We can see you.
Stephanie made Stephanie a co-host.
You're gonna have to
Stephanie,
do it.
hold on.
Okay, Peter.
Stephanie, hold on a second and let me see if I can do this. Make co-host. Okay.
Are you host?
I guess I am. It says I'm host.
Okay.
So Stephanie,
That may have worked. Yes, I think that worked. Yes. All right. There we go.
And Stephanie, if you could expand that so that we just see the
Yep.
there you go.
There you go. All right. Thank you all so much. I'm going to introduce myself. As Mary said, I'm Dr. Stephanie Jacobe. I'm an independent architectural historian. I was hired by the Chevy Chase Conservancy to edit the old historic district nomination, and I ended up making some significant changes to it, both in terms of its boundaries, but also in terms of the history that was presented within it. So I'm just going to give you a very quick 10-minute basically overview of what is in the historic district nomination. I hope all of you will go online if you have not already and taken a look at it. It is rather lengthy. It's over 100 pages. But as I said, we're just going to do a very quick overview here this evening. The first thing I wanted to show you is the map of the historic district. This is the boundary that has been submitted to HPO. As you can see, the boundaries basically cross Western Avenue, 41st Street, part of Military Road, Chevy Chase Parkway, and then back up and around. Now, these boundaries actually do follow the three major subdivisions that were included, which are the three oldest that are in Chevy Chase. And you can see them here on this second map. You can see Chevy Chase, DC. That's the yellow subdivision there, Connecticut Avenue Park, which borders Military Road, and then Connecticut Avenue Terrace, which actually has two sections. When Fulton Gordon put this together, he had one section on the west side of Connecticut Avenue and then another one on the east side of Connecticut Avenue. And we've extended the boundary down to the edge of that subdivision. So I know there's been a question about the houses on the north side of Military Road. They're not being included. That's because we just simply drew a straight line from the end of that subdivision over to Chevy Chase Parkway. That was all. The houses on the north side of Military Road there on the east side of Military Road on the north are in a completely different subdivision. So they were not included for that reason. Okay, the other thing I needed to show you was the statistics that are in there. I know there have been some questions about that. We have, as you can see, 292 contributing single dwellings, 104 twin dwellings contributing. I think one that everyone will be interested in is the outbuildings. Those are the garages that are there in the alleys, the sheds. Only 13 of those I identified as potentially contributing, and those are the ones that have the least number of changes. They actually, in many cases, mirror the style of the houses in question. So they are actually very, very nice garages. And these, I might add, are also detached garages. There are some of you on some of the side streets I know that have attached garages that are part of your house. This doesn't deal with that. These are only the detached outbuildings. You can see apartment buildings. There are commercial buildings there, 24 contributing, 10 non-contributing. We already have 3 of those listed on the National Register. There are also 3 churches, 1 school, and the 2 non-contributing civic buildings. So to take a look very quickly at the statement of significance. So we identified the Chevy Chase Historic District meets the District of Columbia Inventory of Historic Sites Criteria D for architecture and urbanism. Criteria A specifically for its significance to community planning and residential development, and also criteria C with themes of architecture and community development. And the period of significance that I've identified is 1906 to 1964. So for the DC inventory of sites under architecture and urbanism, you can see that these are things that embody distinguishing characteristics of architectural styles and building types, specifically an interest in urban planning and siting, significant appearance and a significance to the development of the District of Columbia, which is pretty much where Chevy Chase is, as we're going to go through in a minute. Under the National Register criteria, A is normally identified with broad patterns of history, so a larger look at the history, but in this case, we've narrowed that history down to community planning and residential development only under criteria A, but then also under criteria C for architecture and community planning and development. And the period of significance, as you see here, it begins in 1906, which is when the first subdivision was platted. There weren't any houses built over there then because it was platted in December of 1906 at the very end of the year. The first houses were not built until 1907. And the second subdivision, you say Chevy Chase DC, is 1907. It ends in 1964 because that is the completion date of the last of the large apartment buildings on Connecticut Avenue north of Military Road. So as that was the last date that last one of those apartment buildings was built, that's the date that we ended up choosing for the end of the district. Everything else after that was pretty much the result of a tear down or something else being destroyed and a new building being put on the site. Okay, to look specifically at criterion A, we identified this in terms of community planning and development because of the significance that Chevy Chase plays in the development of Connecticut Avenue, the development of the Rock Creek Railroad, which went all the way up from downtown Washington, from Florida Avenue, all the way up into Chevy Chase, and these new suburbs connecting downtown Washington as it was in the 1890s with the Chevy Chase Historic District. This was a massive undertaking that was done to basically open up to development the entire section of Northwest Washington. And it is also significant because of the development it helped spur in Woodley Park, Cleveland Park, and the Forest Hills areas as well. Okay, under criteria C, the Chevy Chase Historic District is characterized by its modified grid plan, tree-lined streets, sizable lots, detached and semi-detached dwellings. All of these are characteristics of its planning. Neighborhood-based commercial corridor, array of institutional buildings that were built to help contribute to a comprehensive community, but also the dwellings, the eclectic revival style of the dwellings, the colonial revival, Dutch colonial revival, Spanish colonial revival, classical revival, Renaissance revival, and Tudor revival. All of these things make it a significant laboratory of that style of architecture from this period, the early 20th century. Okay? And we're going to look at just briefly at an overview of Section 8. Section 8 is the section that talks about basically the history of the Chevy Chase Historic District and the history of the area. So I go through several sections here, and this is basically just an overview of kind of the chapter headings. So I deal with the very early history of Northwest Washington County before the creation of the subdivisions. I talk about Francis Newlands, the Chevy Chase Land Company, and the creation of the streetcar suburbs. The neighborhood of Chevy Chase, DC, how each of the 3 neighborhoods that are included in the nomination developed. I deal with the 3 nearby African-American communities, the one at Broad Branch Road, the one at Rock Creek Road, and Fort Reno, the 3 that surround the area. So the history of each of those communities and the history of their demolition. All of that is covered in the nomination. The residential development inside the historic district, as well as the commercial development, and then to look at the history of the transportation, and then the other community elements, the education, social, and religious institutions that were in Chevy Chase. And at the very end, I have a short section on mainly what was, I believe, the Chevy Chase Historical Society's efforts towards truth and reconciliation for racism and white supremacy and the legacy of Francis Newlands here in the historic district. That's discussed at the very end of the nomination. Okay, one other thing I wanted to go through, and I did this at a public meeting that the Chevy Chase Conservancy held 2 weeks ago. And I wanted to go through it again because I think it's very important. There is a website out there that's put together by Prologue DC, and it's called mappingsegregationdc.org. And I put a section of these maps up here. Everything that you see on these maps shows where the racial covenants were within the District of Columbia. Now, this is not a final map. This is a work in progress. Prologue DC is still continuing to work on this. As projects come to the forefront, as funding comes to the forefront, they actually have a donate button on their website now if you want to support their work. But all of these areas within the district are places where there were racial covenants. And I know all of you know that they were there in Chevy Chase, and they were in the historic district. And inside the nomination, I go through each one individually, discussing at what point it was put in, who put it in, if I can determine it, and just giving that information for each individual lot. And let me give down here on that map, you couldn't really see east of the river, but here, down here, you can see the areas east of the river, the red and blue. Those again were places with racial covenants. And then I've also included this map here, which is kind of a close-up of the neighborhood. And you can see on the other side of Rock Creek Park, boy, there were a lot of racial covenants over there. And so I want to come over here. I'm going to show you where you are. I'm going to orient you. This is the Military Road here. This is Military Road at its intersection with Connecticut. And this is the historic district right here. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but it is right here. The ones that we have identified within the district, which we did in concert with inside the historic district, which we did in concert with Prologue DC, are not even yet on this map. So they haven't even placed some of these new ones that have been discovered in the last 12 months on this map yet, because they're still in the process of updating it. But I wanted everybody to see this because racial covenants were pervasive throughout the United States. They were not just here in the District of Columbia. Many of you may not have even heard about them until a few years ago. As a historian, I, of course, learned about this in graduate school 20 years ago, but many of you may not have ever heard of this before. But these things, as I said, were pervasive throughout the United States and pervasive throughout suburbs that were built throughout the 19th century and throughout the beginning of the 20th century. So I am going to stop there because, as I said, I just wanted to give a brief overview. And Peter, I don't know if you've seen, but you've got several people sitting in the waiting room. I didn't want to admit them. So, but anyway, I thank you all for your time. I thank you for listening. I'm happy to take questions about the nomination to the best of my ability. And then I'll turn it back over to Mary because I think she's going to introduce someone else.
Mary, are you going to come back online?
I was waiting for you. I'm sorry. Yeah, I wanted to make one small correction. Stephanie, actually, it was Historic Chevy Chase DC that you meant to say, not the Chevy Chase Historical Society.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Yes, that you are correct. That just slipped out of my brain for one moment there.
Historic Chevy Chase DC has done a lot of work.
Yes, I apologize for that. Yes.
And so I want to make sure people know about their
yes.
efforts.
No, their efforts were very important. And as I said, I apologize for goofing up the name.
That's okay. So thank you very much, Stephanie. I think we'll probably take questions at the end. I wanted to make a few other points. And one of the things I wanted to make sure people understood was that there's two new zones that the city government is proposing for our area. One for the community center library site and another one for the avenue from Livingston Street North to the Circle. And as part of those new zones, they are proposing a lot of new matter of right construction. Anyone who remembers 5333 Connecticut Avenue, the glass apartment house that's standing now, probably understands the importance of having a seat at the table and being heard, because that was essentially a matter of right construction project. So much so that it took about, the neighbors weren't even aware it was happening. There were about 6 or 7 permits in before somebody accidentally discovered that there was going to be a building project there. That would never happen in a historic district. There's a lot of transparency and information that would be shared. And so people would not be in the dark and would not have to fight and use all their resources to try to get some kind of compatibility between commercial construction and residential construction. I think a lot of the people that were involved in 5333 could speak well. And I know Richard Graham has an oral history on the HCCDC website about his efforts and those of his neighbors to try to get that apartment house to be more compatible with the residential structures nearby. And unfortunately, they were not successful because it was essentially matter of right. And so matter of right is a very powerful process by which people can build anything. They can demolish what they want. They can build what they want. Bill Gordon will be talking in a minute about matter of right construction going on at 3711 Livingston Street, Northwest. For any of you who have not been by there, I urge you to see what's going on there. And many of you will remember the house that was once there. And I think one of the issues we feel very strongly about is that many people talk about Chevy Chase, DC as an exclusive neighborhood. I think most of us who moved here 30, 40, 50 years ago certainly don't think of it that way and didn't think of it then. But we all could easily believe it now because we have houses that are selling around $825,000, which may not be cheap for most people, but it's cheap for this neighborhood. And we have houses that are purchased at 1.1 million, again, fairly reasonable for this area. But what happens and what's happening now, more and more and more, are developers are coming in, buying these properties, some not even, before they're even put on the market, getting them at good prices and then simply doing what they want, which is to maximize their return and move on to the next project. And so we are left with the destruction in their wake and with the high prices. 3711 Morrison was purchased for 1.1 by a developer, and most of us think it's going to be listed in above 3 million. And that does not make our neighborhood more affordable. It makes it more exclusive. And one of the things that 3711 would never have been demolished in a historic district. It's a contributing 1926 4-square brick house that is the kind of house that most people moved to Chevy Chase to buy. So I just wanted to talk about matter of right. It's really important in a historic district that the ANC and the residents in this area would have a seat and a voice at the table on new construction. This ANC, I know, doesn't like to be ignored. I'm a former ANC commissioner, and I understand very well how hardworking it is to be one of these commissioners. And I can tell you that the hard work should result in somebody listening to what you have to say. And so I think that with a historic district, it's in all of our best interests to support it, because it gives the ANC and all the residents a chance to weigh in on things. Nobody likes to be ignored. Nobody likes to have anyone make decisions behind their back or against their wishes. And in a fair society, in a fair process, people get a chance to speak out. So I wanted to make sure that is one of the major benefits of a historic district. It's also very important to recognize that it would be less exclusive if we, it would be more exclusive if we don't have one, because we'll be seeing more and more of the $2 and $3 and probably $4 million houses in our community. And who really wants to see that? Selling your house in a historic district will not depreciate your value, will not ruin the value of your house. There is no such thing as a historic district doing that. So please do not believe anything you hear about how a historic district will reduce the value of your house. It is not true. Historic districts do not stop development. A historic district only helps to create a compatibility and design review issues. We're going to have new development in Chevy Chase with or without a historic district. We will have affordable housing with or without a historic district. And I think that many of the other issues, solar panels, there have been at least 2,100 solar panels that have been installed around the city, and probably more than that. And basically, we're just trying to protect our environments and provide people with a voice for new construction. I'm sure I'll have other comments to make. And I also want to make one other point about homeowner permits. Much has been made about the process of getting permits, but in fact, it's a very smooth process that's been going on for decades. And if you're on the Chevy Chase Community Listserv, you know that we've been having discussions about 95 to 98% of homeowner permits requested are usually approved online, but within 1 to 2 business days. There's a chart that people have seen, and it's a real thing. The small percentage of ones that are not approved are generally complicated, complex, controversial projects that merit some review and that help bring people in to voice their opinions. So I just wanted to make sure people knew about that, and to know that in the commercial district, one of the things we have is a very, very strong commercial district. We have very low vacancy rate there. We have a lot of independent, women-owned, minority-owned businesses there. And these are the kinds of businesses that thrive in a low-scale commercial district like the one we have. There are historic tax credits that are available to owners of historic properties that are income producing or part of a building. That could be eligible for a 20% income tax credit for rehabilitation work. It could be an apartment house, a business, rental units, home offices. It does not include primary residences, but these are things that are very much available to people. So for anyone who thinks that a historic district would be bad for business in the commercial district, that will not be true. It's actually very good. It supports the Main Street operation. It supports the businesses that are right now operating in historic buildings, especially on the west side. So I will stop here now and introduce Bill Gordon. He's a resident of the historic district and a longtime resident of Washington, I think a native Washingtonian, and he will talk further about some of his interest in this issue.
Mary, just so you know, you're at about 27 minutes. So Bill might want to be tight with his
Bill's
comments.
got about 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, commissioners. My name is Bill Gordon. I live on Livingston Street in the boundary proposed for the historic district. As Mary mentioned, I'm a native Washingtonian. I was born and raised in Forest Hills. After college, I moved back to Capitol Hill into a group house. I met my wife. We rented a house on Capitol Hill on Independence Avenue. We loved the area so much. We bought our first house in the Capitol Hill Historic District. We did major renovations to that building and received all the permits we needed without difficulty. When we got married and decided to have kids, we just needed to move closer to our parents so we could get built-in babysitting help. So we moved to Chevy Chase. We love Chevy Chase because it's a similar feel to Capitol Hill. We love the interesting architecture, the gables, the front porches, the columns, the bay windows, the different siding materials in the houses, stucco, brick, clapboard, shingle siding, the variety of gardens and ornamental trees, and of course, the commercial corridor that provides the anchor of the neighborhood with small scale buildings and locally owned unique businesses. No, George Washington did not sleep in any of our houses, but they represent the end of a time when a 2x4 was really 2 inches by 4 inches. The siding on my house is still in excellent condition after 100 years. It's old growth redwood. The floors are beautifully grained quarter-sawn white oak and heart pine that came from old growth trees. There are no more old growth forests, but their legacy lives on in our houses. It would be a shame to see them end up in a landfill. One thing to understand is most houses in Chevy Chase are not built to the maximum allowable height and lot occupancy. When a developer buys a house in the neighborhood, they have every incentive to build the biggest house possible. That means the house next to you could be purchased, demolished, and a much bigger house could be built right next door, and there's nothing you can do about it. In the last few years on my block alone, the 3700 block of Livingston Street, 4 houses have been bought by developers. None of these houses went on the public market. All of the sellers were in some kind of distress, so a fast sale to a developer was made. One person needed money for a lawsuit. One was in foreclosure. One had only one heir that wanted fast money, and the other was sold due to sibling conflict. These houses sold to developers for $850,000 to $1.1 million. And with a little TLC, all of these houses could have been livable for many more years. After major renovation or demolition, one sold for $1.8 million a few years ago. One sold for $2.5 million. One is for sale right now for close to $2 million. And the one still under construction, the picture which I've circulated tonight, will probably sell for close to $3.5 million. This makes the neighborhood less affordable and more exclusive. And if anyone wants to see the outcome of some of these sales, take a look at 3711. Imagine being the bungalow to the east of this new house, or having this house next to your house. It is still under construction, so I don't know what the final design will be, but I know for sure the scale, and it's big. We have heard from the staff, as Mary mentioned at HPRB, that 95% of all permit applications in historic districts are made online and granted without issue in 1 to 2 days. How many of you in this area, in this proposed district, expect to make such significant changes to the front of your house that you would be in that very small percentage of permits that get added scrutiny? I'm guessing it's a pretty small number. So what do we get in return for being a historic district? We get some assurance that out-of-scale houses don't get built next to ours. When an out-of-scale house is built, it will forever change what you're used to. Will you have the same sunlight coming through your windows? Will you miss the mature flowering trees that used to be in your neighbor's yard, but are gone to build this big house? And will you feel the loss and sense of space? Those changes are forever. I'll be subject to the same requirements as everyone else, but I believe the benefits of a historic district far outweigh the 1 or 2 days of additional permit review. And I pulled, just for the fun of it, I pulled some of the recent permits within the last year for the Capitol Hill Historic District where I used to live. And the lists of approved permits include rear yard additions, new spiral staircase, sunroom addition, rooftop alteration, 3rd-story rear addition, 2-story rear addition, 2-story rear addition, partial 3rd-story addition, penthouse, and a new basement entrance, small addition, 3-story addition. Demolish an existing garage, a new garage and apartment, a new ADU, screen porch addition. So things can change. So it's not a lose-lose situation. It's a win-win. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Mary, does that wrap it up for the Conservancy for right now?
Yes, for right now, we should turn it back over to you. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay. So I'd encourage the other side to stay within the limits that I would encourage Living Chevy Chase to stay within roughly the same time limits, which is basically a half an hour. Okay. So.
We've got Winston Sale online who's going to screen share.
Hi there. Yeah, if somebody could enable screen sharing for me.
Winston, if you would raise your hand, I could find you more easily on this list.
Oops, that was a clap. Here we go.
That ought to do it for you.
All right, thank you. Greg, you want to go ahead? Can you see it?
No.
No.
Oh, okay. Let me try that again. Right. Now can you see it?
Yes. Now we can.
And I will expand it.
Now you need to broaden it to the whole screen.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Do you want it? There you go.
All right. I'm Greg Schmidt. I'm one of the co-founders of Living Chevy Chase. I have to say I have a little PTSD walking in here tonight because I believe the last time I was in this room, I contracted COVID, which I think a number of you did as well. Anyway, tonight we presumably have some immunities that are enduring, and we'll get through this without further disaster. We are a group of concerned neighbors who recognize the importance the impact this proposal will have on our freedom to improve our properties and regulate our commercial district. We believe Chevy Chase should remain an architecturally diverse and dynamic community and continue to grow and thrive organically as it has in the past. There will be three of us presenting tonight. I am a recovering attorney, a software entrepreneur, and I live inside the proposed district. With me is Katherine Kerley.
Hi, I'm Katherine Kerley. I am currently an attorney. I do estate planning at Weston Feinberg in Bethesda. I have 2 elementary school age daughters at Lafayette, and my husband and I live in the 3900 block of Legation Street, and we've been there for 10 years.
And I am Winston Sale. I'm a real estate and banking attorney with the federal government. I'm also a Lafayette parent of a 3rd and 5th grader. I'm a Ward 3 DC native, born in GW Hospital, and I live in the proposed historic district in my wife's family home. So my wife has lived in our home one way or another since like 1993.
We thought we would start by reviewing a little bit of the history of the historic preservation effort in Chevy Chase. Next slide. There we go. Which of course began with the 2007-2008 application of historic Chevy Chase DC. It was a significantly larger district. It had 6 subdivisions or portions thereof instead of the 3 current ones. And indeed, I learned from this application that there are actually about 12 or 13 more or less contemporaneous suburbs that could qualify on similar grounds to the 3 that are being proffered for the moment. The period of significance actually should be 1907 to 1946 in that application. There was extensive outreach, community outreach before the application was filed. Indeed, the application never was filed. There were block meetings and many ANC, block by block meetings and many ANC meetings. And I will also throw in that the discussion of the history of Chevy Chase did not have the more fulsome history that the current application has about the exclusionary practices and tactics employed by the developers and the neighborhood generally, including the evictions of the black enclaves, the 3 black enclaves that Stephanie mentioned. The ANC also engaged in a mail-in vote of the property owners within the proposed district, and that vote was a resounding rejection of the application. And being a broad-based community-based organization, Historic Chevy Chase decided to withdraw the application before it was ever filed. The ANC nevertheless went ahead and voted unanimously against the historic district. One other item of note was the statement of David Maloney, who's the head of the office of HPO at the time, saying, "We don't impose historic districts on neighborhoods that don't want them." And now Winston will lead us through the history since 2008.
Thank you, Greg. So just briefly to talk about what have we seen in sort of the natural experiment that we have encountered since the last attempt to create a historic district in Chevy Chase. There have been hundreds of home sales in the intervening period and only a really small handful of teardowns or major redevelopments in the area. And our esteemed neighbor, Mary, said in 2008 that creating a historic district in Chevy Chase was the only way to protect our buildings from demolition. And while her concern is admirable, it has proven just not to be the case. We have not seen the wholesale redevelopment of the neighborhood in 15 years we were warned of then, and we're being warned of again, and seems equally unlikely. You know, there are some difference of opinion about the aesthetics of the new builds in the neighborhood, but for the most part, replacement houses have been largely compatible with the neighborhood, and same with altered houses. People have put on additions, they've even changed the style of some of the contributing homes, and for the most part, the neighborhood does not appear to be sort of this mismatch of ogre homes, you know, dominating the streetscape. So some examples that were given on the listserv of homes that had been changed were, for example, 3722 Livingston, where a third floor was added and the style was changed slightly, but not what I would consider really a dramatic change. Same with 3714 Livingston. This home, 3713 Livingston, was set far back from the street and was demolished and replaced by a new build, which I mean, I personally consider it to be quite an attractive home, although it is quite large, but it's not the only large home on that street or in that section of the neighborhood. And then affordability, Mary touched on this, homes in this neighborhood have become ridiculously expensive. So this is my block. I live on the 3900 block of Military Road. This is 3937 Military. It sold in 2021 for $965,000, and it was effectively a shell of a house. It was in terrible disrepair. It had been vacant for a long time with an addition on the back that was falling apart. A young family from out of town bought this house, put a substantial addition on the back, and now live in it full time. And, you know, do I love the style of the addition? Not exactly, but I'm really glad that it's no longer a derelict home. And they're a very nice family, very pleasant people to have in the neighborhood. And it's nice to see a young family be able to come into the neighborhood. Similarly, 3901 Livingston was in terrible disrepair and is under construction as we speak. They just put new windows in it that look historically accurate, probably more so than the windows that were replaced. And it's not being torn down and turned into some kind of development, you know, nightmare. And to give a sense of the cost, so I'm a real estate attorney and I used to represent investors and developers who built multifamily housing and mixed use residential commercial all over the country. And so I have a sense of what historic preservation regulations do to the cost of building a project. So in our example here, we have a shell for $1 million or $1.1 million. It's a 3,000 square foot renovation at $500 per square foot, which is typical in DC for a gut renovation. And if you have to use historic materials and go through the extra regulation, you know, the extra process of going through HPO and the architect and possibly lawyer fees involved with that, you could easily add $100 per square foot. So we're talking for 3,000 square feet, that would add $300,000 in extra cost to that renovation. That's enough money to send a child to college. And for what? You know, for something that is not necessary. This is not a life and safety requirement. This is an aesthetic desire that's trying to be, you know, would be imposed on us. So next we're talking about the 2023 Historic District application. And for this, Greg is gonna discuss it.
One detail that goes with Winston's talk is that since the 2008 application, and indeed since 1986, we have had 4 tear downs in the proposed district. 2 of the were replaced with duplexes on Morrison and Livingston, and 1 was the remorseful buyer on Oliver Street that found structural problems that required the house to be raised rather than renovated, and then the other was the little house that on Livingston Street that was actually a non-contributing house, 1958 construction, that was replaced with the larger house. So that's the threat of the extent since 1986. The current application is filed by Chevy Chase DC Conservancy, Mary Rowse. It has a narrow membership. Indeed, it was created specifically for the purpose of filing this application. And its timing, as she alluded to, is driven in part by the desire to participate in the Civic Core redevelopment fight and to create a seat at the table, as she puts it, for the neighborhood. The district size is about half the size of the previous application. It's only the 3 subdivisions and not the 6. There's no real explanation for why this was narrowed, other than the fact that they happen to be the 3 marginally oldest subdivisions that are contiguous to Connecticut Avenue. And the period of significance was extended from 1907 to 1946 to 1906 to 1964. And the rationale being that that was when the last of the apartment buildings on Connecticut Avenue was built, which seems to me to be not particularly relevant to the history of the neighborhood. But I would note for a couple of commissioners who raised the possibility of affordable housing on the Wells Fargo site, that is now a contributing structure, which would be subject to the demolition constraints of a historic district. This is just a map of the areas that are now excluded, that were included before. And this is the current map, which, as I said, I don't really understand the rationale for quite. I would also note, and perhaps this is a question Ms. Jacobe can answer, that over there on the far left corner there, between Livingston and Military and 41st and 41st Place, is actually part of the Connecticut Avenue Park subdivision, and was for reasons that I scoured the application to find out why it was left out, apparently just for the neatness of having 41st Street be the boundary. But that's, 25 houses that are in that subdivision. This time around, the outreach was quite minimal. It was 2 virtual education sessions, which I believe reached 100 or so people, many of whom were signed the 2-page flyer. And the last of those sessions was 18 months prior to the filing. There have been several listserv posts, as you might expect, and a 2-page flyer, which is the second page of which is simply signatures of supporters, was distributed maybe twice, maybe just once. But we don't think that the outreach has been effective in reaching very many of our people within the proposed district.
All right, since I'm not recovering from being an attorney yet, I'm going to begin presenting the case against creating a historic district. So HPRB, when it considers whether or not to allow people to make changes to their properties, they only consider compatibility with the other buildings within the historic district. And in fact, if you look at the statutes, the purpose of the Historic Preservation Office is to retain and enhance properties that contribute to the historic district and to assure that alterations of existing structures are compatible with the character of the historic district. When you look at the definitions of alteration, it is exceptionally broad. It's any change in the exterior appearance of a building or a structure or its site. So while the proponents make much of we get a seat at the table with any changes that happen within our community, homeowners are giving the Historic Preservation Review Board a seat at our table when we want to make changes to our properties. They will not consider the homeowners' budgets. They do not consider whether or not we have sent our children to college yet. They only consider the aesthetics. So there's plenty of reasons why that's bad for homeowners, but it's bad for small businesses. And it also perpetuates a history of exclusion, which is at the very foundation of why Chevy Chase exists in the way that it does today. But back to the homeowners. So there's one thing that it's incredibly important to note is that we talk about the permit process over and over and over and over again, how it's just the same. It's exactly the same. It all gets approved. It's the same process. I cannot possibly be the only homeowner in Chevy Chase within the proposed boundary who has renovated my home twice using a postcard permit. And yet postcard permits are not permitted in historic districts. The postcard permit is the one that your contractor goes down to DCRA and gets within 24 hours, and he brings it back to your house and he puts it in your window, and then the changes commence. So it is certainly possible to live in Chevy Chase for 45 years and never make a single change to your home, but most people do not. We buy homes that are over 100 years old, and they need, at best, they need repairs. At most, they need a massive amount of work. So to say that it's just the same is just not true. So the things that they're going to consider, again, they don't consider your budget, but they do want historically accurate windows, siding, roofing, other fixtures. You cannot, they frown upon low maintenance composite materials like AZEC decking, aluminum siding, vinyl siding, not permitted. And at the recent DC Chevy Chase Conservancy program on January 30th, a representative from HPO said that under no circumstances would a vinyl window be permitted in a historic district. So if you have one, you better hope it stays in good condition, because if you ever have to replace it, you are looking at a much more expensive window. This is particularly bad for young families. This is an extremely expensive market to buy into. When you have a baby on the way, or you have small children and you're paying for daycare and they haven't gone to college, and you're paying $1 million for a house that needs a lot of work, to have someone come in and tell you what you can do to your house without any offer of assistance, how to pay for it, it's hard to bear. So many supporters would like to tell us how long they've lived in Chevy Chase, as if the length of time they've been in the neighborhood gives them more buy-in than those of us who purchased here within the last 10 or 5 years. We're going to stay here for a lot longer. That's just math. I'll turn it back to you.
So as we said, it's bad for young families. It's bad for aging in place. Accessibility is an issue for a lot of folks, and changing their house to accommodate their needs. I would point you to a case, an HPR case in Mount Pleasant, where a 90-year-old couple was attempting to move to their basement, a one-level basement, which had access from the rear, but not from the front because of the grade of the house. And so they petitioned to put in a ramp that would go to the basement entrance. And the HPRB said, no, that was going to change the nature of the facade, the look of the building, and therefore they could not do it. In fact, one of the commissioners suggested that they might want to rearrange the structure of their interior so that the kitchen was at the front rather than at the back. They have accessibility design guidelines that basically say improvements should not be placed in front of the home. And if you have limited mobility, they would prefer to use the back door. The energy efficiency issues come up a lot. The solar panels issues come up a lot. They have made some movement on solar panels. They were originally forbidden to be seen from the street. Now they simply have to be disguised so that they can't be easily seen from the street, and done in a way that is in many cases not going to be optimal in terms of energy efficiency. Energy efficiency, like every value other than compatibility, is subordinate to preservation. And the windows must look historic, even if they are less energy efficient. And the mantra that we keep hearing, that older buildings are more energy efficient, is of course nonsense. So we have young families buying into the neighborhood, old families on fixed incomes, and we also have owners of smaller houses because additions under the basic design guidelines of the HPRB must be subordinate to the primary dwelling. If the primary dwelling is smaller, then the addition must be even smaller. And the visibility from the street, while not absolutely prohibited, is discouraged, and you'll end up working with them a lot on trying to hide your addition behind your little house. And this is an issue, whoops, we lost our slides. Winston, you're off.
Winston, what happened to the slides?
Winston, are you still with us?
I'm looking for him.
Okay. Well, we will make the slides, of course, available to you guys after the show, and I don't think we need to hold it up for that. But this particular application has a twist that is not often found in the historic district applications, and I don't think has ever been really adjudicated by the HPRB, although there have been cases where an R2 zone has been included in a historic district, including North Cleveland Park. As you know, the west side of Connecticut, the two subdivisions there are zoned R2 for duplexes, and that has been a major concern for the Conservancy's application, which is to prevent developers from coming in and substituting a duplex for a single-family detached house where they have sufficient lot size to do that. This is an issue because HPRB has what is effectively a no exceptions tear down rule. There are nominal exceptions such as economic hardship, but that can only be shown if you're going to lose money on your house, which is clearly not going to happen with any of us. It also has, there are various other necessary in the public interest and those kinds of provisions, none of which apply to homeowners.
Greg, could I interrupt for 1 second? Winston, you've been made a co-host. I'm looking at you. Do you want to put the slides back up? They're gone at the moment. What?
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I got dropped from the meeting somehow. So I would need you to redo that for me to be able to reshare the slides.
Okay. Well, the bottom line is that because of the no tear down rule, the R2 area, which is 2/3 of the proposed district, will be downzoned to R1. And that will effectively put a tax of several $100,000 on homeowners who might wish to do that. Not many people have wished to do it. We've had 2 since 1986, but you can see that there could be circumstances where you have a family in crisis, where something, one spouse gets dementia and you suddenly find that they're looking at many thousands of additional dollars of care per year, where they have a disabled child who needs a trust fund to carry them on after the parents are gone. There are many such possibilities, and it seems very unfair to penalize the folks on that side of Connecticut Avenue who have those lots and houses and who could potentially benefit from this duplex insurance. Very briefly, we have never really discussed, and there wasn't really much focus on the apartment buildings and condos, but it seems to me that it obviously will to some extent increase their costs and of maintenance, particularly replacement of windows, among other things. And it'll put some restrictions on their alterations and improvements, which are probably going to be fairly rare, but they're not non-existent. And for what? For what benefits do the apartment and condo owners get? It seems to me that they're basically non-existent. And Winston, who is now back with us, will talk about the local businesses.
Thank you, Greg. So moving quickly through this. To create a historic district in our central business district core would increase the cost of maintenance for all of the businesses that have exterior canopies and awnings. Also restrict alterations and improvements within the business district, and appears to be an intent to undermine the initiative to upzone the commercial district, which would allow new buildings and potentially larger buildings to be constructed, increasing the density and commercial viability of some of those spaces. Also, outdoor eating spaces can be significantly limited or curtailed in a historic district. In particular, Little Beast, Bread and Chocolate, the Avenue, and Opal are all in historic buildings. They also all have exterior seating areas that obscure part of the historic facade and would not normally be allowed in a historic district. And those are significant number of seats for those businesses. Were they to lose them, would make it very difficult for them to continue operating. Also, signage permits are required for any kind of sign, even a sign inside of a window. Any sign over 1 square foot in size you must get a permit for in a historic district. This even covers lawn signs on residential homes, which is in the historic district regulations. So I I canvassed every small business or almost every small business in the commercial core 2 weeks ago and talked to most of the owners and managers of those businesses. None of them were aware that this was in process. None of them were supportive of it. And a lot of them were really concerned about what this meant, especially the businesses, what this meant for their businesses long-term, their ability to increase their operating space through covered outdoor space, or the potential that they might lose that space. So this is in no way helpful for small businesses in our neighborhood. I'm going to skip this case to move on quickly to the social justice argument. So I want to thank first Dr. Jacobe for her hard work in updating the application. I really learned a lot from the application about the history of Chevy Chase. So for example, Chevy Chase's namesake is actually a tobacco plantation where 13 slaves worked without pay, most of whom were children, some in the fields and some as servants in the house. I did not know that. Francis G. Newlands, founder of the Chevy Chase Land Company, was an avowed racist and a U.S. senator who, while developing Chevy Chase, ran on a white plank that would have limited immigration to whites only, and he used minimum home construction costs to exclude Black buyers from buying land in Chevy Chase. Lafayette Elementary School is built on land taken through eminent domain from the descendants of a community of free Black landowners and the Chevy Chase Citizens Association in 1955. Their constitution allowed white adults only, and they were opposed to busing Black children into the neighborhood. It's our position that creating a historic district would increase construction and maintenance costs. This would raise the economic barrier to home ownership and reduce the likelihood of new multifamily development in the urban core. This would have a disparate impact on persons of color who have been historically excluded from economic opportunity in the city by institutional racism. Chevy Chase is one of the least diverse neighborhoods in the city. The 2020 census shows that less than 20% of Chevy Chase residents within the historic district identify as persons of color, compared to 45% of the city population at large. And this is no coincidence. It is by design of Francis Newland and those who followed in his footsteps to exclude persons of color from this neighborhood. We feel that creating a historic district would perpetuate a consistent cycle of exclusion. And regardless of what Chevy Chase DC Conservancy's intent is, it would send a message to the city that Chevy Chase intends to remain an exclusive enclave that is hostile to further integration. And we think that that is wrong and a totally inappropriate outcome of the creation of a historic district. So we have a number of technical deficiencies about the application that I'm not going to get into. But going forward, we ask that Chevy Chase DC Conservancy conduct additional significant outreach. We ask that the ANC conduct a vote as they did in 2008 to gauge the input of those affected both within the district, but also in the surrounding community. And we ask that if community sentiment is such that it is clearly against the application of a historic district, the Chevy Chase DC Conservancy will withdraw their application the same as the historic Chevy Chase did in 2008. So we don't end up in a situation like in Bloomingdale where there was significant community opposition and it was created anyway despite that opposition. So thank you very much for your time, and we encourage everybody attending to visit livingchevychase.com for more information. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
Yeah. Okay, commissioners, essentially everything else on our agenda tonight are updates. So I suggest that, wait, Mary, just wait. So I suggest that we do 20 minutes to a half an hour of questions. But we do need to get out of here at 8:30. If that's your preference, then do we want to do commissioner questions first or community questions first?
I prefer to go to community.
Okay. So again, echoing Commissioner Sherman, please come up to the mic. We get no transcript if Otter doesn't hear you. So
Mayor Goslin, can you hear me? It's Mary Rowse. Can you please acknowledge me?
I know it.
I have a question.
Hold it, Mary. We're going to questions and answers from the audience.
Peter, we've been charged with making the proposal for this historic district. So in all fairness, we should be given the chance to rebut some of the misstatements and disinformation that's been just shared.
But Mary, why, instead of having a back and forth between the two sides, why don't you frame your rebuttals in your answers to people's questions?
Well, you've chosen not to have HPO here tonight, so I don't think anybody can speak for HPO. I can do what I can, but I don't think the opponents should be speaking for the city either. So I think that's a point that needs to be made, and I'll be happy to make it.
Commissioner Lynch, you had a question, then Commissioner Nash.
Yeah, my question is just on the procedure. What we're going to do is take questions from residents in the audience, and ANC commissioner questions will be done at another time. Is that right?
We can take commissioner questions from commissioners as well, but I want to go to audience first and then ANC commissioners after that. Okay, Commissioner Lynch, you had a question. Okay, so let's go to community first. Okay, anyone in the community that has a question, you can approach the mic.
Hi, my name is Lee Schenecker, former ANC chair. I've lived in this area for about 50 years. I used to live 5 or 6 blocks down the street at 5543 30th Place. I now reside at Ingleside, 7 to 8 blocks from here. I am quite delighted, quite frankly, to support the historic preservation effort that I see as is written on this particular paper. 10 years ago, I was opposed to historic district. And the reason being, I didn't think it was needed. I am also very strongly in favor of, through the small area plan, not just for the civic core, but over the next 20, 30, 40 years, maybe 50 years, the further development of Chevy Chase of Connecticut Avenue on both sides of Connecticut Avenue, from Chevy Chase Circle down to Livingston Street. And I think a historic district would in fact help to protect the high value houses on either side of Connecticut Avenue. I disagree with the Living Communities folk, if that's what your name is, because I think there should be a stop, a block, a buffer against too much development. Once you start putting in more density on Connecticut Avenue, you're going to obviously have people, developers and so forth, who want to do a lot of tear downs and so forth. And I think a historic preservation district would in fact help that. And by the way, as one thing, I think that the historic district should not only go to Chevy Chase Drive, but should go down to Nevada Avenue. So I welcome it. I hope that Mary Rowse doesn't take this to absurdum. I think a historic district which allows development of Connecticut Avenue over a 20, 30, and 40-year period of time is very much in line with what's happened historically in Chevy Chase, going all the way back to the early 1900s. It occurred over a 30 to 40, 50-year period of time. And finally, I know that the commissioners can't do this, but this room is totally inadequate. And I would suggest that all you people who are listening to this remotely, come to this facility. And if it's crowded, it's crowded. You people cannot understand what's going on in this room with the current remote hookup. I thank you. I welcome historic district if it's done correctly. Okay, thank you.
Couldn't agree with you more about the room. I don't think the hybrid is, our technology is not doing it. The concrete ceilings are. Yeah.
Oh, remote thing. Shut it down.
Hi, I'm Alan Marzilli. I have lived on on Morrison Street. Before that, I lived on Livingston Street, which explains my confusion. My wife and I have loved living in the neighborhood. We did a renovation. We wouldn't have been able to do that renovation without it. And, you know, our neighbors were fine with it. Maybe people upset, oh, their house is too big, whatever. I mean, they're talking about, we need this to stop construction. Well, you know what? They're stopping us from doing construction. This is like having a homeowners association on steroids. When talking about how this is going to prevent fights, that is absolute nonsense. It is going to provoke fights. I've personally witnessed Mary Rowse trying to stop people from doing legal construction. When they did that duplex on our street, she was out there interfering with the construction crew, and the police had to come get her away from those guys who are just trying to do their jobs. This is going to, that is absolutely true. My wife drove past and saw it. Quit lying. You are interfering with them and the police came.
That is outrageous.
That is absolutely true. It's absolutely true. You are going to just stick your nose in everybody's business. When I try to redo my walkway, you're going to be, oh, the walkway is destroying the neighborhood.
Chair,
and I'm sick of this.
Wait.
Point of order, Chair.
Wait. Yeah.
Point of order.
Go ahead.
So let's
Hold it.
make sure that
Let
we
me
don't.
ask some questions.
Wait, Commissioner Lynch.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hang on a minute. Make sure we don't attack individuals. Just keep your comments not directed towards a person.
Yeah.
And so we can maintain order.
I think we're probably over the 3-minute limit as well. So
Okay.
thank you
Well,
very
I
much.
will just say that
Well, I'm not sure if we're. over the
nothing
limit. Just hang on a
unites
minute.
the two sides of the street. And I'll give it to these are the historic and architectural differences between the two sides that are being united with the sole purpose of stopping that, which is what we all know.
Thank you.
And I suggest that, I mean, I hate to do this, but in fairness, I mean, it was I think Mary Rowse ought to have some short time to respond.
Both sides will have time to respond on each issue. I mean, not just because of what occurred, but if either side wants to address a question, they can.
That was pretty personal. It seemed.
That was a personal attack, Lisa, and it was untrue. It was made up.
Wait.
Hang on a minute. Hold on. We can't have everybody trying to do this, okay? Let's slow down. What I am saying is I'm going to give Mary an opportunity to respond, but regardless, if any side, the Conservancy or the other group wants to respond to someone that's asking a question, I'm going to give them that opportunity. So Mary, with that being said, if you want to respond to him, please do so.
There was a house at 3823 Morrison Street that we worked very hard to stop from getting demolished. And it was demolished. I don't know what incident is being referred to. There was never an incident where police were called. Somebody photographed the demolition of the house. We were out protesting with signs, collecting signatures of support before the house was torn down. There was never an occasion when I interrupted anybody doing their work or any police were called. That is simply false.
Okay. Thank you, Mary.
My name is Charles Cadwell. I have a question. In 2007 and 8, I was not yet a member of historic Chevy Chase, DC, but I have been since then. But I don't support this historic district for reasons I will elaborate in my submission to the HPRB. Tonight, I have a question I want to suggest to you, and that is the historic district nomination talks about the eclectic nature of our neighborhood. We've got houses of all different styles, different ages, different scale. And my question is, why does eclectic between 1907 and 1964 warrant more protection than eclectic since then? The reason we like this neighborhood is it's developed over those decades, but we're going to stop that at the arbitrary date of 1964 for reasons that I don't understand. So that the scope and the vagueness of the scope, the period of significance, I think is one reason to reject this application. There are others that I will elaborate, but not tonight.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carol Newmeyer Spiegel. I've lived
We live behind Magruder's for the last almost 4 decades. I'm an old Washingtonian, 5th generation, grew up here, love the history of the city, love the neighborhood. I don't have to be hypothetical about our experience with a way too big of a building being built right up against our home, because we've had over 4 years during the pandemic, it's been a nightmare. We had a house flipper, real estate developer from Kentucky come in, buy the house before it was ever put on the market, and has built something that has taken away all of our privacy. Our whole yard is like a fishbowl. 80% of our light is gone. They've done illegal things. DCRA did not do anything. They never showed up with a measuring tape. They ended up not being able to get a permit for a garage, so they got a permit for an accessory building. So they have a 2-story, 2-car garage next to this other huge structure that has boxed our homes in, ruined our home experience, probably affected our property values. And here we are. And my question is, you know, in 2007, I wasn't for a historic society, but if I had known then what I know now, I would have absolutely done it because of what's happened to us. I mean, our home, we used to call our back room our sunroom. Can't do that anymore. We are completely in the shade. And they had a hot tub on the 2nd floor that on their balcony that they built right over us. I'm talking as far as I am to that stage. That's how close the structure is to our house. So it's been a nightmare. And my question is, what else can we do except a historic society to stop this kind of thing? Because it's not hypothetical. It has been a nightmare, and it's going to continue to be a nightmare. And I think their intention was to do an Airbnb, and now it's being rented. So it's, you know, there's a lot of builders that would love to get their hands on this area. And I don't see any other recourse except to protect what we've got, because, I mean, and I think living here for 40 years definitely means something, because I was very involved with saving the playground, very involved with saving the Avalon. And we didn't do this to be exclusive. We did it to preserve the history of our city. I mean, Lafont designed this city like Paris. We don't want to lose that. And my nightmare situation is Bethesda. Look at what's happened to Bethesda. Bethesda is such a mishmash, is so horrible right now. So I don't see any other recourse except a historic situation.
Thank you.
My address?
Yes, I can look at what you're talking about.
My address is 3902 Northampton Street.
3902?
Yes.
Corner of 3902.
Yes, and if you look at the house that was built is facing 39th Street. But it is a nightmare, and if you want to come see what my backyard is like right now, come and see.
I do.
Thank you.
Could I encourage people to keep it brief, or I mean, just not, you know, just to get as many people in as possible?
Can I,
Go to online. Let me go to online.
could I respond to that? Commissioner Gosselin, could I please respond to that question?
Sure.
This is
Who's
Winston
talking?
Sale. Winston Sale.
Okay, yeah, go on.
Thank you. So the answer is yes, there is something else that and some people in this room may be familiar with a DC company called Fundrise, which is like a micro investment vehicle for investing in local real estate projects. So for example, say that you want to invest in a local restaurant, but you don't have the money to do that on your own. You can invest through Fundrise. So, and there would be an opportunity here to create, for example, a local Chevy Chase cooperative redevelopment fund that neighbors invested money into, and then that fund was used to buy and redevelop homes in the neighborhood sort of to the taste of the neighborhood. So rather than developers coming in and extracting value from the neighborhood in the way that was described, that the neighborhood gets together and creates this fund to fund redevelopment and encourages their neighbors who are selling their homes to sell the home to the fund so that the fund can do the redevelopment. And that is one way to achieve this kind of medium balance between a historic district and no historic district, is by basically competing with the developers at their own game using the funds of neighbors in the neighborhood. And this is something, if people are interested, I'm very interested in this idea and would love to discuss it more.
Thank you. Okay. Paul Thomas. And then we'll go to Aissa, and then we'll come back to in person.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank both groups for the informative presentations tonight. I live on Chevy Chase Parkway. It's a short block between Military and Legation. And I'd like to invite Dr. Jacobe or the Conservancy, if not now, at some point, to clarify how the boundaries of the proposed district were drawn. What I just heard Dr. Jacobe indicate is that our house, among 3 houses built in 88 to 89, were included in kind of an arbitrary manner. Our 3 homes facing Chevy Chase Parkway here are behind the Kenmore apartment building on Connecticut. They're non-contributing buildings. As I mentioned, they were built in 1988 to 1989, and they were not in any of those 3 original subdivisions highlighted. So I don't really understand why they're included in the historic district. I'm still weighing the pros and cons of the historic district, but it does feel like the houses on our side of the street here were included in that district arbitrarily. And then looking at some of the other boundaries, I can also see others might have questions about how the proposal was drawn. So I hope at some point the group will come back and provide a little bit more information about that part of the nomination. Thank you.
Can I please respond to that?
Sure.
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah, the National Register has specific criteria on how to draw boundaries. As a matter of fact, they wrote an entire 30-page book on how to draw historic district boundaries. And the idea that boundaries are to be compact, they're to be straight lines, they're not to be cookie cutter, you're not supposed to have donuts missing in the middle. And so it does seem very arbitrary, but in the end, what we had to do is just simply draw straight lines around what we were doing. And the issue was,
there's already not a straight line right there. The line goes through the middle of the block down in
yes,
that
it
far
goes
right.
through the middle of the block because it's linking up with the end of the subdivision, which is the base of that apartment building. At least it is now. But that's really what it is that we come down Chevy Chase Parkway and that we go over and simply connect with the base of the bottom of that second half of the subdivision. And that's what we did. Very simple. There was an issue raised about the houses on the other side of 41st Street. Those houses are very far away. If you stand on the corner of that block on 41st and Military, that's a wide street. And it does not appear, even though it is part of the subdivision, to be part of the subdivision. So instead of reaching across that extremely strange intersection there where there's about 3 streets that intersect to grab those, again, we just kept it as a straight line to keep the compactness of the district. That's all. That's all it was. So that's what we were following. We were simply following the directives that the National Register has published. So.
Aissa.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Elisa Minoff. We live at 3837 Military Road, just down the block from Winston. Our house is in the proposed historic district, and we oppose the historic district for a number of reasons. We have solar panels on the front of our house, which I know is something that would not have been possible if we were previously already in a historic district. The front of our house is actually the area that gets the best sunlight. Here's my daughter, Emma.
Hi, I hate the historic district too.
Okay, Emma, we're going to explain why we're not in favor of the historic district. And my biggest concerns, though, as a homeowner, I have concerns because, you know, we'd love to do more work on our house at some point when we have the funds. But my biggest concerns really revolve around Connecticut Avenue, because I actually I'm one of the neighbors who would really love to see more growth and development on Connecticut Avenue and would love to see more affordable apartment buildings and homes being built in our neighborhood.
Same.
And I'm concerned that having a historic district along Connecticut Avenue could actually make it very difficult for building more affordable homes, for having like more diverse and interesting commerce and retail. And so I would love to get a better understanding of why the historic district was chosen, and to sort of focus just around Connecticut Avenue, because that's a big concern of mine.
Also, because then this neighborhood will only be full of rich people.
Yeah, we want an economically diverse neighborhood as much as we can. So thank you.
Thank you.
May I respond?
Yeah.
We also want an economically diverse neighborhood, and that's, I think, everyone's goal. And I think that's what we have had for many years. But I think with more tear downs and more redevelopment by developers eager for the bottom line, we're going to see more wealthier people coming into the neighborhood, because that's all who will be able to afford the $2 and $3 and $4 million homes. And secondly, the solar panels on the front of your house would be allowed in a historic district. Please do not believe for 1 minute they would not be. Also, the growth on Connecticut Avenue, the whole east side, practically nearly all of the buildings on the east side could be demolished in a historic district. So there's the potential for all new development. And there are some non-contributing commercial buildings on the west side. So I think that there is room for growth everywhere. A historic district does not freeze anything in time. There will be new construction with or without a historic district in the commercial district. But a commercial district is, they thrive in historic districts. They do very well. In fact, 37 neighborhoods are historically designated in the city. And I think that you'll find that many, many people are quite satisfied with living in them.
May I respond to Elisa's questions as well? Briefly, thank you.
Yeah.
So with respect to solar panels, I wrote a lengthy post on the listserv about this. So if you're on the listserv, I recommend you look up solar panel by Winston Sale, and you'll see my post with all of the restrictions, not just on solar panels, but other green building improvements that are common and will become much more common as our country moves towards greater energy efficiency in residential housing. Solar panels on the front of the house are explicitly prohibited, Mary, in the design guidelines. There's even a picture on page 44 of a house with no solar panels on the front, given as an example of what is preferred in a historic district. And then with respect to multifamily development on Connecticut Avenue, like I have said, I used to represent developers and investors in multifamily projects. 30% of the cost of a multifamily project is soft costs. So that's land use, lending costs, other kinds of development costs before you even put a shovel in the ground. And if you add historic preservation district, you can increase those soft costs by easily 25, 30% on top of the 30% you're already paying, because of the amount of time and expertise it takes to get through the historic preservation process with a multifamily building. And if you're talking about trying to include economic diversity and create affordable units in those buildings, those increased soft costs come at the expense of affordable units in those buildings. And I've seen this in person.
Okay, thank you.
May I make one comment, Lisa? May I make one comment?
Mary, I'm actually going to go to in person. I'm going to hold you all both to 1 and 1, just so we can get through the line of people here.
Hello and good evening. My name is Craig Pollock. I am a new resident of 3728 Oliver Street in the proposed district. And we moved about 1.5 years ago. And I would say that I'm not sure we would have moved and done the renovation on our house had it been in a historic district. The house needed a lot of work. We were very excited to move to the neighborhood. We generally appreciate the neighborhood and appreciate people's concerns for the neighborhood, and would not want to see it become a historic district for that reason, because I think it would limit options for families like myself. I think the other angle I come to this is as a public health researcher and as a physician who studies the connection between affordable housing and health. We did a study in Baltimore that showed as families move from high poverty neighborhoods into lower poverty neighborhoods, their rates of asthma exacerbations decreased by half. This is like on the order of an inhaled corticosteroid, on the order of new biologic agents for asthma. Like these are really, really significant, that housing is medicine, housing and affordable, housing is important, and housing in opportunity neighborhoods is really what matters. And I would love to see a discussion about what we can do as a community to try to increase the opportunity that my family is so blessed to have.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the time today, NC. My name is Rob Bauza. I'm a resident at 3919 Livingston Street, Northwest. I've been a resident for more than a decade here in Chevy Chase, DC. And I am concerned. Sure. I'll just pick it up like this. Is that better? Okay. Sure. So again, if you didn't hear me, Rob Bauza at 3919 Livingston Street, Northwest. I've been a resident here for over a decade. And I'm concerned of the effects of that the proposed historic district may have. I know there's a lot of good information coming from both sides, a lot of passionate debate going on, which I certainly am appreciative of. As someone with a younger family, we are continually looking to grow and evolve into our house. We love our house. It's over 100 years old. And there's things that, you know, to be able to, I guess I'm concerned about our ability to make meaningful changes to make our house livable for us as we move forward. We were blessed this past year to welcome a new child into our home. Now we were a family of 5 as opposed to a family of 4. And we realized quickly we were going to need more space. So we were able to do an attic renovation to convert that into some extra bedroom spaces on the order of months. And to have that completed prior to the baby arriving. Would be really surprised if we would be able to get through all of the logistics to get that done if there was a historic district tagged in our neighborhood. I'm also concerned about the effect of the proposed historic district may have in terms of chilling environmentally friendly upgrades and additions. I know you've heard that you still can perhaps get certain upgrades, but they've got to be compatible, which also comes with a price. And as a homeowner with 3 young children, still have to go to college, we need to save every bit of money that we can. And I'm just concerned about the price that it's going to cost us in terms of homeowners for making meaningful renovations to our home. In fact, in the course of making a number of renovations, we've talked to a number of contractors that we've worked with, and they've all agreed that and told us our prices will go up dramatically if we were in a historic district. That's one of the first questions they ask when they start to engage with a new customer. And so we are very concerned from the cost and economic standpoint and the vitality of our neighborhood, especially for newer residents who are stretching to be able to afford to be in the neighborhood. You know, and I think as we move forward, we would really appreciate to that continued flexibility. And really what I heard, I wanted to mention one thing in terms of what I heard from the proponents for the historic district. While there is some certainly older elements of this neighborhood, I heard the primary concerns were I will keep it quick, we're retaining control. So this, in my eyes, is taking control as a matter of right away from residents of the neighborhood. And if I can quote one person that made some remarks at the very beginning, nobody likes to have decisions made behind their back or behind their wishes. That came from the proponents of the historic district. And I would like to pause there and hopefully have them consider those particular words and how they reflect on other members of the community that may be affected by the proposed historic district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You can do another 10 minutes. Again, Ron Kahn. I live on Livingston 3726 in a 100-year-old house in the area. So I'm used to lots of maintenance. I would never consider any type of shoddy or less than quality repair to a 100-year-old house, because that's like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. So anything along the lines of, you know, making sure you can maintain your house if it's 100 years old, that's an expensive undertaking, and I understand the concerns people have. But as part of it's kind of a conundrum we're in, because it costs a lot to maintain these older houses, and there's no way around that. So I think we get lost in the discussion of what similar materials or looks of certain houses are
They're very expensive to update. Some people can't afford to do that. We understand that. We need to be flexible enough to accommodate everybody within that discussion. I think we're at pillars of that discussion versus the middle of that discussion. I don't know how to get to the middle, but I like the middle. Anyhow, I'm in support of affordable. One of the reasons why, and it's not been talked, is the voice that they bring to the party. I like the voice they bring to the party. I've attended their telecons. They open it up. They answer all the questions that you have. They don't try to, soft pedal a position. They'll answer your questions. And when I'm in those telecons, I'm not hearing anybody of any of the things I've heard in contrast on that telecon. Okay, I'd like to know how many historic districts there are. And are those all perilously in the same condition as what I'm hearing about the problems associated with historical districts? If I go to the Parthenon and say, oh, gee, I think I heard historical districts have some problem with their outdoor seating that would be detrimental to their business, I'll go over there tomorrow and talk to the owner. I know the owner, and see if that's the truth. I've looked in detail at a lot of stuff that's put in listserv, and I found it to be somewhat condescending, disinterested, kind of not accurate. And I'm a person that likes facts, and all these things thrown around off the wall as if, well, maybe some of it's true, but it doesn't mean in all cases. It doesn't mean in all cases. So I'm just trying to get to the truth of this thing. It's very difficult when I hear such opposing parts. The other thing I want to mention, which nobody has, I don't think, is perhaps having historic designation puts a defense against some of the time bombs, what I call time bombs in our small area plan. For example, removal of current residential zoning in areas adjacent to Connecticut Avenue. That's clearly in the small area plan. Would having a historic preservation status help in preventing that? That's what I call a time bomb waiting to go off. So I'm just trying to get to what's the advantages of having historic preservation. I'm in favor of it because I don't think it's detrimental as I've heard it. I have 11 kilowatts of solar on my 100-year-old house. Okay. I'd like to hear from historic preservation. Would you allow that? That'll factually probably answer all the questions. And I've heard all this back and forth, but I just not at a factual level to be able to make a decision. And I don't know if you're here to make a decision on it.
No, we're not.
I don't think we're there today. And so there's a lot to go on. And I just hope that we can find a way to get a win-win out of this thing. I heard that. But I will follow up on a lot of the facts that have been presented and find out if they are facts. That's the only way you can really get to the bottom of the objectivity of this thing.
Okay.
So,
And Ron, I'm gonna have to
appreciate
ask you to wrap up. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay.
Can I make a quick response?
Yeah.
Very quick. So as an attorney, and especially
Just want to respond on the point about the business, the outdoor eating. In the slides we have is reference to a case involving the medium rare restaurant in Cleveland Park at Connecticut, and I think it's Ordway, which had a huge temporary tent that they put up during COVID that covered the entire sidewalk, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They proposed after 3 years of running that to put in a much smaller pergola, which is shorter, smaller, narrower. It took them, they had to hire a consultant. I don't know how many hours it required, but I guarantee you they paid more to consultants than they did eventually for the pergola. They got approval after 2-hour-long hearings. And one requirement was that they move the pergola 3 feet away from the front of the building, which prompted the restaurant to say, well, now our waiters are all going to get soaked in bad weather, which prompted a response from one of the HPRB members. Waiters all over the world get wet.
And about the facts, everything that I have said and everything that I post on the listserv, and the same goes with my colleagues. We're all attorneys. We're professionally obligated to be able to cite our work. And it's all citable to the regulations posted by the Historic Preservation Office. And if you have any questions about it, this stuff is technical. I get that it's, hard to get through all the nitty-gritty details, but the devil is in the details, and I'd be happy to show you where they are in the guidelines.
Lisa, may I respond?
Yes.
it doesn't help to be condescending to neighbors. We're all smart people here. And I think it's really offensive to suggest that the Mount Pleasant ramp was a situation where historic preservation overreached, that people weren't building something to code. It was a code violation. And I think this is an example of some of the facts, quote unquote, that have been issued tonight by the proponents of, by the opponents of the effort. I don't think anyone should take those facts and run with them. I think that we need accurate information shared so that people can accurately assess whether this is something that they want to do. And the only accurate people really are the HPO, HPRB people who can do that. But those of us who share an interest in promoting this historic district idea also make it our business to be as accurate as possible. And there's no such thing as needing a permit for a porch light. There are many other things that I cannot rebut at this time, but I think it's unfair to suggest that solar panels cannot be put in the front of houses. They prefer a low profile solar panel, but they will do that. And I think there is nobody here who should state what the HPO or HPRB would do or how much it would cost. I think Winston Sale, you have been giving a lot of estimates and a lot of erroneous information about what it might cost to be in a historic district and do construction. And I think we should not go there because you have not been through it. And unless you have, we need to go on the facts here. So I would rather see that information shared by the HPO people who know better. Their goal is not to make life hard for people, but to assist people in realizing the goals and dreams that they want. And there is no review over interior work. So for the person who had an attic renovation, I'm sure that would still be possible in a historic district. And remember that permits are done online. They're not done in person. They're not holding you up. They're done simultaneously with other permits that you're already waiting for. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mary. So we have 2 in person, then I'm gonna go to 2 online.
Hi. Thanks. Hi, my name's Julie Walters. I live on the 3700 block of Legation, so within the proposed district and across the street from the massive surface parking behind the Kenwood, which feels like this ticking time bomb somehow of we won't be notified about construction moving forward in our future. And so when we got the notice about the proposed historic district, my first thought was about, oh, okay, well, that would be helpful in the event there were some large scale construction project that we would be able to have some sort of an influence on in a way that otherwise, like was mentioned earlier with the other huge building, people were completely caught off guard. I stood up today largely because I'm very concerned about trying to increase affordable housing in the neighborhood. It's a huge priority for me. I think that it's a little bit disappointing at best on the number of comments about opposing the historic district that talked about, my cost to my house without really addressing whether or not the historic district would somehow negatively impact the ability to improve the quantity of affordable housing in our community. My question, I think, is, can we please try and dig up more data about which of these 2 positions would better increase affordable housing in our neighborhood? I came here tonight because I kind of wanted to learn the answer to that, and I really don't feel like I've heard it. I confess that my personal experience, we moved into the neighborhood almost 10 years ago, and we moved into the neighborhood because it was more affordable than where we were living in Falls Church City, where every single house that was like the little brick small houses that had aging families or aging owners were purchased, torn down, and huge houses on small lots built in their place. And if you drive around Falls Church City now, you'll find that it is a very not affordable community to move into. We were priced out. We could afford, Tony Chevy Chase DC, but not Falls Church City. And so my anecdotal personal experience is that the historic preservation will improve the opportunity to maintain affordable houses if it diminishes the incidence of developer construction projects, which we have seen increasing. And I did appreciate the statistic, I think somebody shared, about how few of those projects have happened since 1986. But I would argue that, kind of like Falls Church City, where people are moving into that community because of the strength of their public schools, that this community has kind of, the trend line has gone up in terms of the strength of our local public schools, which is probably coinciding with the increase of large scale development projects on single family lots, where people are moving into the community with multiple children and are looking for bigger houses and can do the math and can see that I can buy a $3 million house instead of spending $50,000 a year on 4 children to send them to school. So I do think we are kind of at a little bit of a tipping point in our neighborhood about the number of developer purchased construction projects. As the age of the population increases, the age of the houses increase. I think we're going to see more and more and more of that, a la Falls Church City. But I would oppose the historic district in a minute if I thought it was going to hurt affordable housing. It just feels like we're not hearing a lot about that from the proponents. From the opponents of a historical district, because they're really just concerned about, paying for their windows, is what I'm hearing a lot of, and it's a little disappointing. So I guess my question is, can we hear more about how this is going to affect our opportunity to increase affordable housing?
Okay, thank you. And we have in the past, probably over a year ago, had a presentation on the historic district and its impact on affordable housing. Before you leave, if you give me your email, I'll send that presentation to you. It's online, but you kind of have to dig through it. And it's something that we could probably bring experts back to talk about.
Lisa, may I make a comment on that? Because was that
very, very quickly, Mary? We got
presentation with Brian McCabe.
It might have been.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there are a lot of people who are opposed to historic districts who try to say that they are going to make life worse for affordable housing. And that is not true. A historic district does not stop affordable housing, but it also makes it more affordable for people to come in if you can preserve the smaller starter home or downsizing home and add on to it. The bungalow on Livingston Street that could have been saved in a historic district could have been added on to. Instead, it was torn down and replaced with two $2 million duplexes. And by the way, nothing.
Mary, I'm gonna have to move on. We'll have, I'm very familiar with Mr. McCabe and his work. Okay, go on, Andrea. Thank you.
His work was based in New York City. Remember that.
Yep, well, he is an expert in this field. Go on, Andrea.
I just wanted to say, with regard, somebody made a reference to the historic district sort of overruling zoning, I thought. And I wanted to say that that historic district cannot dominate or defeat zoning. The future land use map dictates what zones can be allowed. And for this area, that has been set in stone, that we can have tall buildings on Connecticut Avenue from Livingston up to the Circle. And so when Mary says, whether we have a historic district or not, we will have redevelopment. Now, when there is redevelopment, the law is, well, the 2 zones that have been proposed for Connecticut Avenue north of Livingston both have as an absolute requirement inclusionary zoning plus, which depending on the building and all sorts of ratios that I don't understand, requires up to 20% affordable units. And that will be whether there's a historic district or not. Let's see. With regard to the speculation that based on the past, there will be few tear downs in the proposed historic district, I think that's really can't be, isn't particularly defensible. I don't live in the historic district and I don't even live in Ward 3. I live in Ward 4, Chevy Chase, but in parts of Chevy Chase outside the proposed historic district, there are tear downs are going apace. And what's being built in the place of what's torn down really doesn't resemble any of the neighbors in scale, style, or materials. In fact, many of the houses are widely considered to be hideous. I'm sorry, I have to just say that. So I think it's just unsubstantiated speculation to say that the historic district has some sort of magic where tear downs won't happen. In fact, I talked to a real estate agent about selling my house, and he proposed that I sell it to an investor who would let me stay there as long as I needed to pack up my basement. And this is after I told him I don't want to sell to a flipper. Absolutely not. So there is pressure on people to just make it easy and sell to an investor, and your house will soon not be anything like it was. Yep. And last, I want to say, we saw on the map that racial exclusion covenants were all over the city, particularly dense, at least what's been mapped so far in Ward 4 across the park from us. And the recounting of the taking of the land from African-American communities is, of course, it's reprehensible. But when we talk about the, Lafayette School being built on the site of a former African-American community, I don't understand. Lafayette was recently, extremely renovated and added onto in a consistent style with its original building. And it's a beautiful school. I mean, should we have torn it down because it occupies a space where a community was displaced? I just don't understand the logic behind somehow putting the blame for dastardly behavior on the physical buildings that remain. If there's something beautiful, if they use old growth wood, as Bill Gordon mentioned, if it's more sustainable to keep the building, I don't see how the building should be destroyed as some sort of scapegoat for the behavior of the humans that came before us. Thank you.
A point of order. I just want to be sure the commissioners know, I assume the chair intends to dispense with the rest of the agenda. Is that correct?
Let me get through these two, maybe not. Katie and then Carol, and I'm going to ask you to keep it to 2 minutes. We're running out of time here.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Katie Levy. I live on the 3800 block of Legation Street. It's actually the second home we've owned on this street because we love this block so much. We've been here about 10 years, and our current home was built in about 1900. I just want to say we oppose the historic district. One of the main things that we've loved about this block is how our neighbors have added on and made modifications to be able to stay on this block and in this neighborhood. And in reference to some of the homes that have been torn down or significantly added on to, a lot of them are wonderful families that otherwise would not have been able to move to this neighborhood. And really just feel for a lot of families who might be moving into here and trying to raise young kids and plan for college education and that sort of thing. These all of a sudden additional cost burdens, but also just worries about process and just being inclusionary as a neighborhood are worrisome to me. And I appreciate the opportunity just to speak about this and just hope that, we can come together, that we all love this neighborhood and really just want what's best for it. But it's, as we said, making decisions, a blanket decision for so many homeowners just seems very extreme. And just thank you again for the opportunity to speak. And I just hope that ANC members will take into consideration how many folks may be also completely unaware in the neighborhood of even this proposal and what's really going on.
Okay, Carol?
Yes, hi, good evening. I'm not appearing on screen because I'm having a bad hair month. I wanted to just wanted to ask the opponents of the historic district what will prevent, the trend has already been established for tear downs and very huge and expensive buildings going up. And without a historic district, what will prevent the wholesale raising of all the beautiful houses in Chevy Chase, and in their place putting up little McMansions? I mean, there's a house at 5416 Nevada Avenue that's being sold for $3.5 million. My husband and I toured it. It's the most horrible thing you've ever seen. I can't imagine having to live next door to that house. And we understand from the agent who was trying to sell that horrible thing that the developer is planning to build 6 more identical houses in the neighborhood. So 6 more $3.5 million hideous, horrible, overpowering houses that will completely dominate their neighbors. So without a historic district, how do we prevent this, from each house going over like dominoes, boom, 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 boom? I'd also like to point out that there's no more room for trees on any of these lots. By the time they get these giant houses with their 8 giant ADUs and garages on there, there's no more room for trees. And so if this is like dominoes, each of the old houses gets bought up and knocked down and replaced, boom, 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 our whole tree canopy is going to disappear, and Chevy Chase will be just unrecognizable. So without an historic district, how can we prevent this from happening? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to you in person. He'll be the last person in person, and the last person online will be John.
Hi, my name is Matt Stone. I live at 39th and Legation. I've been there for 20 years. I am opposed to the historic district, and it's almost like an extension of the last question, but I'm going to flip it to the proponents, which is, I think a lot of us, we're not really in favor of tear downs. We want affordable housing, but it's hard for me to understand how that there's a line to then dictating how I replace my windows or manage the exterior of my house. Like it's this very blunt force instrument that doesn't make a lot of sense to most of us who have historic homes, have no intention of tearing them down. And it feels like people actually do care about just legislating their tastes on me. And so that's what's confusing to me. I think there's a lot of common ground on the tear down issue and on affordable housing. But then there's a huge disconnect that I don't get why anyone cares if I put in vinyl windows or a cheap door or whatever. It's just, it's a personal taste issue and nothing more.
Thank you. John.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak.
No, we have to go to the next person. John.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I just would like to say that my family and I moved into the neighborhood in 2021, and the historic dimension was not a factor in our decision whatsoever, and that we are strongly opposed to the designation of a historic district in our neighborhood, of which we fall within the boundaries of the proposed district. And I just want the ANC to know that me and almost everyone on the Northampton Street block is almost uniformly opposed to this historic district. And I think young families in particular are not in favor of this designation, because I feel that an older demographic is imposing their tastes and preferences upon the rest of us. I should be allowed to modify my house the way I see fit to accommodate my family as it grows. And I don't feel that this blanket designation is in any way beneficial to our community whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioners, so I think, well, I want to hear from Lynch and Gosselin on our next steps in this process. The rest of the agenda items, we can do like maybe a minute update on these, but I do think just a quick 1 to 2 minutes, how you guys propose to move this forward. It's a lot of questions on the table.
Well, I think that one way to move it forward is at our next meeting to limit the amount of time, but to bring HPO in and ask some questions of them. And then Peter, do you have other steps?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to poll the community in a similar way that we polled the community about the civic core, and maybe make the questions a lot more brief and simple, but that get to the root of this. And I would also like an opportunity for the commissioners to ask more questions and discuss amongst ourselves the ins and outs of this process. And I know Commissioner Zeldin and Commissioner Sherman have been focused quite a bit on the houses that have gone up in their neighborhood that seem outside the bounds of what's typical for the neighborhood. So I think what they've been exploring in that regard would be really helpful to understand. But I think, again, polling the community, understanding where everybody stands, giving people enough time to respond to that poll, and then also having time for all of us to discuss and weigh these issues together would be really helpful, on top of hearing from the Historic Preservation Board as well.
Just a couple of quick comments. First of all, thank you, all of you, for your stories. I very much appreciate hearing all of the perspectives that you've brought tonight, both sides of this, all sides of this. I represent about 2,100 people in my single member district. I see my job as informing, engaging, and hearing their views on all these matters. I am, like many of you, trying to separate wheat from chaff, trying to understand what this would mean, what the rules and regulations would be. I do know that in the District of Columbia, there are currently 70 historic districts. There are 37 residential historic districts, which is to say that this is not the district's first rodeo in historic districts. So there is a vast lived experience that I think we should, here in Chevy Chase, at least be familiar with and understand what it is. I also strongly second bringing in HPO. I was on the call that Chevy Chase Conservancy hosted with several HPO staff members who fielded questions. A lot of the matters we're discussing tonight are factual issues related to rules and regulations, and no one better than HPO to answer those questions. I certainly know that I would benefit from being able to hear their answers and hear your questions and receive those answers. I want to let you know that last Thursday, I initiated a survey in my district. I have about 800 people on my mailing list. I asked all of my constituents on the mailing list 2 questions. I asked them how interested they were in this issue, given that we live in my area about a mile from here. So you might assume that being at that distance, people might not be interested. 82% of the people who've responded, 160 people since Thursday, responded to the survey to say that they were interested in this issue. And a majority of them said they were extremely interested or very interested, which is to say it's not just right here. There are lots of people in our ANC who are not here tonight who are very interested in this, and I represent 2,100 of them. And I owe it to them to provide them with information so they can make an informed judgment, and then I can represent their interests, which is how I see my job. I would also say, when I asked the question about how informed they feel they were about this, there was a significant lack of information on the part of many of them. About half of them said they were only somewhat informed. About 25% said they were very or extremely informed about the issue. So I take away from that I've got a lot of work cut out for me. I have to do my very best to let them know what this is, what it would mean, and then to hear their views on the matter and represent those views. So I'm going to benefit hugely from bringing HPO and HPRB in, if that's possible. I'm also going to benefit from looking at the experience across the district. And then finally, I want to say this. I want to hear from as many people who are not in my district, those that are very close here in the 2 Peters single member districts, as to their views. I believe strongly. I was a major advocate of the survey on the Civic Corps. I'm a major advocate of surveying the population. If I lived in here in the historic district, I'd want somebody to ask me, do I want this? I'd want somebody to consult with me, and not just in a meeting where 100 people are present, as great as this is, but there are several thousands of people here that we need to consult. So on that, I'll end my comments, but I look forward to continuing the review.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Ferguson? Okay, go on. Go on.
Yeah, I'll just say it is very difficult to get information. I've been trying to do my own research. I've been trying to get in touch with HPO staff. Sometimes DC websites aren't up to date. And, I'm an ANC commissioner and I'm having trouble getting information. So I hope this is, you know, I echo that. We want to get those officials in front of us and get clarity on what the rules are, what the history has been. I've been trying to find history on the past ANC input on historic districts. That's been hard to find, but I look forward to learning more in this process.
Okay.
May I make a comment about Zach Ferguson, because Zach had an email exchange with
Mary.
Sure, I
You
can address.
No. Hang on a minute. Mary, with all due respect, you haven't been recognized. You said you were a previous ANC commissioner. You know we're working on a tight deadline. Let us get through. This will not be our last meeting. As you all are familiar with the ANC, we try to do very thorough education sessions. We'll definitely bring back the agency responsible, which is HPO. I definitely want to get some of the work that we've previously done, regardless of what people think of the expertise of the people that did those presentations. But we have talked about historic districts in the ANC before. So I want to make sure that the community has access to that information so you can watch that presentation. I think amongst the ANC, we need to talk about the polling issue and make sure that we're all on the same page on how that's done, and get a better timeline of when this is coming down the pike. So we are definitely going to have more conversations. If you guys want to start by, maybe getting a presentation set up with HPO, we can start there. Commissioner Lynch?
Yeah, very quick. I also think it would be a great idea to get our ZDD and Racial Justice Task Force involved in some of the specific issues.
Oh, definitely.
Of these. And I know there were people in the audience, I didn't catch all of the names, but there were folks that were concerned about affordable housing or building issues, cost issues. Please reach out to the entire ANC and hopefully we can get you plugged in either to one of our committees or different groups that are interested in those things so that you can continue to get involved. I think one of the best things the ANC can do is to bring people into the process and allow you to also do some of the research and do some of the updates so that we're all plugged in and you have a role in this.
Okay, so I can tell you definitely ZDD, actually Race has been working on this issue already, so they will have a presentation and that is something for us to consider. We want to bring our groups in and allow them to present and the community to ask them questions as well as the two groups. So with that, commissioners, I'm going to ask that we suspend the remaining agenda. It was quick updates on the bioretention basin, RFP Civic Corps, just basic next steps, the Deputy Mayor for Education boundary and assignment study relating to our schools, agency announcements, task force reports, and commission business. Are you all in favor of that?
Treasurer, we need the treasurer report. We need to.
Okay, accept the treasurer report. Go on, Zach.
Okay. So we need to approve our quarterly financial report for fiscal year 2024, quarter one. We spent about $12,000. We still have a very large balance. We have about $43,000 in our bank account. But pending any discussion, and if anyone's interested, these reports are always available. Happy to talk about, most of that money was spent on the survey, about $8,000 or $9,000 on the survey. But pending any questions or discussion, I vote we approve the QFR for fiscal year 24, quarter one.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion on the table is to approve QFR 1. All those in favor, raise your hand. No opposed, no abstention, motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Okay, can I ask everyone?
Hang on a minute.
I just want to be
Let
sure,
me
when we get up, you please put your chairs up on that rack. They walk out when we.
Let me adjourn. Thank you. Meeting is called adjourned 8:39. Please take your chairs. Thank you.
You're not gonna.